Daniel Hayes lived a life of quiet routine, his world revolving around his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, and the small mechanic shop he ran on the edge of town. Every morning began the same, packing Lily's lunch, walking her to school, and then rolling up his sleeves to fix the endless stream of battered cars that rolled into his garage. Money was always tight, and though he never complained, the weight of bills stacked on the kitchen counter often kept him awake at night. That Friday afternoon, however, his predictable world was shaken by the sound of a sleek black sedan pulling into his lot, its glossy paint shining like a jewel against the dull backdrop of grease-stained pavement. From the car stepped a woman whose presence seemed to command the very air around her, tall, elegant, and dressed in a suit that whispered wealth and power. Alexandra Pierce was known in the city as a successful entrepreneur, but to Daniel, she was simply a stranger standing in his garage with eyes that carried both confidence and an odd flicker of desperation. When she asked to speak with him privately, Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, more curious than concerned. What she said next nearly knocked the breath from him. She explained she had a prestigious family event the next evening, an occasion where her success and independence would once again be scrutinized by relatives eager to see her stumble. For appearances, she needed a husband by her side, someone who could shield her from their whispers and judgment. And she wanted Daniel, a man she had only seen in passing but who, she claimed, looked strong, dependable, and real. In exchange, she offered him more money than he made in months, enough to pay off debts and give Lily things he could only dream of affording. Daniel blinked in disbelief, trying to process her unusual request. Pretend to be her husband for 24 hours. The very thought felt absurd, even laughable, yet the sincerity in her eyes kept him from refusing outright. He thought of Lily's worn-out shoes, the overdue rent, and the way Alexandra's voice trembled just slightly beneath her polished exterior. Against every instinct that told him to walk away, Daniel heard himself agreeing, not realizing that this single decision would alter the course of his and Lily's life forever. The following evening, Daniel found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the man looking back. Gone were the grease-stained jeans and worn flannel shirt he usually wore, in their place was a perfectly tailored suit Alexandra had arranged, fitting him so well it almost seemed to transform him into someone else entirely. Nervously adjusting his tie, he thought about how strange this was, pretending to be someone's husband for a night, but when Lily came running out in a little lavender dress Alexandra had gifted her, beaming with excitement, Daniel's doubts eased slightly. "Daddy, you look like a prince," she whispered, and he smiled, scooping her into his arms. At the Grand Pierce estate, chandeliers sparkled like stars above them and guests moved about in gowns and tuxedos, their chatter a low hum of curiosity when Alexandra walked in hand with Daniel. Whispers trailed behind them, some skeptical, others surprised, as Alexandra introduced Daniel with confidence, her fingers curling around his as though drawing strength from his presence. Though he felt out of place, Daniel played his part with a natural warmth that even Alexandra hadn't expected, listening intently, smiling when needed, and offering light-hearted remarks that earned genuine laughter from those around them. When relatives questioned how they had met, Daniel's voice carried a steady charm as he told a simple story of crossing paths by chance, a tale Alexandra nodded along to as if it were their truth. Meanwhile, Lily stole hearts with her innocent chatter, clinging to Alexandra's side as though she had always belonged there, and to Alexandra's surprise, the child's presence softened her guarded edges. Between the clinking of glasses and polite smiles, Daniel caught glimpses of Alexandra's vulnerability, the way she tensed when her cousin made a sly remark about her sudden husband, or how her eyes dimmed when a rival suitor mocked her independence. Each time, Daniel subtly tightened his hold on her hand, steadying her without a word, and she found herself leaning into his quiet strength. What began as an act was starting to feel disarmingly natural, as though the three of them were a family not bound by contract but by something deeper, something neither Daniel nor Alexandra dared to name. As the evening progressed, Daniel began to sense the undercurrent of hostility that pulsed beneath the glittering chandeliers and polished smiles. At first, it was subtle, a cousin's raised eyebrow, a whispered comment about how quickly Alexandra had found a husband, or the way an older aunt scrutinized him as though trying to peel away his very skin. But then came the sharper blows, delivered with the kind of venom wrapped in politeness that only wealthy families seem to perfect. One man, tall and smug, stepped forward with a glass of wine in hand, smirking as he said, "So this is the miracle husband who appeared out of thin air. Tell me, Daniel, do you find it hard keeping up with Alexandra's accomplishments?" The jab lingered in the air, drawing a few chuckles from nearby relatives. Alexandra stiffened beside him, her jaw tightening, her eyes flickering with both anger and shame. Something in Daniel snapped. He hadn't signed up for this charade to stand idly by while strangers chipped away at her dignity. Straightening his shoulders, he met the man's eyes and replied with a calm but cutting firmness. "Hard? No. I admire her. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met, and anyone who can't see that is blind." The room quieted, the smug man's smile faltering as Daniel's words carried more weight than rehearsed flattery ever could. Alexandra blinked, her defenses cracking as she looked at Daniel, stunned by the sincerity in his tone. She could see it wasn't just part of the act, he meant every word. Later that night, when the music softened and Lily fell asleep curled in Alexandra's lap, Daniel sat beside her on the terrace, the glow of lanterns painting warm shadows across his face. He confessed in a low voice that he hadn't agreed to her plan only for the money. "I didn't want you to face them alone," he admitted, his gaze steady on hers. Alexandra's heart trembled at the honesty in his voice, a warmth spreading through her chest that she hadn't felt in years. She had hired him to be a shield, nothing more, yet he was becoming something far more dangerous, someone who saw her not as a millionaire to impress, but as a woman worthy of being cherished. The morning after the glittering event, Alexandra met Daniel in her sunlit sitting room, an envelope in her hand, its thickness betraying the generous payment she had promised. She held it out to him with a practiced composure, but her heart pounded, for she feared that once he accepted it, the fragile thread between them would snap, leaving only memories of borrowed closeness. Daniel glanced at the envelope, then at her, and instead of reaching for it, he shook his head with a quiet finality. "I don't want your money," he said, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering. "What I did last night wasn't for this, it was for you." Alexandra's breath caught, her carefully built armor crumbling in an instant. She had lived her entire life surrounded by people who saw her wealth first, her heart second, but Daniel, a single father who had every reason to take the money, was walking away from it as though it meant nothing. Emotion welled in her chest, breaking through years of restraint, and before she could stop herself, her eyes blurred with tears. Just then, Lily wandered into the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and climbed into Alexandra's lap as though she had always belonged there. Resting her small head against Alexandra's chest, the child whispered softly, "Can you be my mom now?" The innocent word struck deeper than any confession could, melting Alexandra's composure into trembling joy. She wrapped her arms around Lily, her heart aching with a longing she hadn't even admitted to herself until that moment. Looking up at Daniel, she found his steady gaze waiting, filled with quiet hope and something far more profound than gratitude. "If you'll both have me," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I'd like this act to become real." Daniel, overcome with a mix of relief and awe, crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder, his other hand gently covering hers as it rested on Lily's back. For the first time in years, Alexandra felt not like a powerful millionaire fighting battles alone, but like a woman who had finally found her place, in the warmth of a man's steadfast heart and a little girl's unconditional love. What began as a desperate arrangement had blossomed into the kind of family all three of them had been searching for, though none had dared to hope it would ever be theirs.